All right, so welcome to another deep dive.
Yeah.
This time we're going to be looking at something maybe a little bit different.
Mhm.
We've got a stack of excerpts from business textbooks,
Mhm.
all about management and personnel.
Right.
Um, and I have to say,
Yeah.
this stuff is way more interesting than I thought it would be.
It really is.
We're talking about leadership styles, employee motivation, even like how roles are shifting in today's companies.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me because a lot of these things might seem like dry theory when you read them in a textbook,
All right.
but they actually have a huge impact on how businesses operate and ultimately on everyone's work experience.
I know, exactly. And,
Hmm.
one of the first things that kind of jumped out at me was this whole section on leadership styles.
Mm.
They break it down into like three main categories,
Mhm.
authoritarian, democratic, and then there's that laissez-faire.
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 Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's important to remember that these are really just extremes on a spectrum.
Most leaders don't fit neatly into one box.
Right.
They might be more authoritarian in a crisis, but then take a more democratic approach when they're brainstorming new ideas.
Mm-hmm.
It really depends on the context.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine a football coach trying to get consensus from the team on every play during a game.
Right, exactly. It wouldn't work.
It would be a disaster.
Chaos.
Total chaos.
Yeah.
So what about you? Like, have you ever had a boss whose leadership style just completely clashed with your own?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think everyone's probably experienced that at some point.
Right.
It can be so frustrating when your need for autonomy, say, bumps up against a manager who's a total micromanager.
Yeah.
It's almost like they're operating from that old Theory X mindset.
Theory X, yeah. What is that again?
Well, it's the idea that workers are inherently lazy and need constant supervision to get anything done.
Oh, yeah. Theory X, that's the one that basically says employees need the stick more than the carrot.
Right, exactly. It's kind of a pessimistic view of human nature, to say the least.
It really is. I always think of those old cartoons where the boss is holding a whip,
Yeah,
Love it.
exactly. There's a reason that image is so pervasive. That kind of management style can be incredibly demotivating.
Yeah, for sure. So then what's the opposite of Theory X?
Well, that would be Theory Y, which takes a much more optimistic view.
Okay.
Theory Y argues that people actually want to do good work. They're naturally curious, they're capable of self-direction, and they even seek out responsibility.
Interesting.
The key is creating an environment where those qualities can flourish.
So it's not just about dangling rewards or punishments. It's about tapping into those deeper psychological job requirements you mentioned earlier.
Exactly.
Can you give an example of what that looks like in practice?
Sure. Think about autonomy, for instance. Instead of micromanaging every detail, a Theory Y manager might give their team a challenging project and then step back, trusting them to figure out the best approach.
Oh.
That way, employees feel ownership over their work, they learn new skills, and they can contribute their unique talents.
That makes a lot of sense. And it seems like this connects directly to that whole idea of human capital, which, as a quick reminder for our listeners, is the idea that employees are a company's most valuable asset.
Exactly. They're not just interchangeable parts.
Right.
They're the ones who drive innovation and create value.
Yeah, and when companies truly embrace that human capital mindset, we see a real shift. It's not just about extracting value from employees, but about investing in their growth, creating a culture where they feel valued and empowered.
Right, because at the end of the day, if you're constantly worried about someone looking over your shoulder, are you really going to be able to do your best, most creative work?
Probably not.
Probably not, right? But if you feel trusted and supported, you're way more likely to step up and contribute.
That's true. Speaking of stepping up all of these evolving ideas about employees and motivation,
Yeah.
they must make the role of a leader even more complex, right?
Oh, absolutely. Think about the range of skills required these days. Everything from strategic planning and decision-making to communication fostering, teamwork, adapting to constant change.
Wow.
And then there's this whole concept of Kunnskap's Basert service. I came across it in one of the textbook excerpts.
Skeps Basert service.
Yeah, it's a Norwegian term.
Right.
It basically means knowledge-based service.
Interesting.
It goes beyond just being friendly and helpful.
So it's not enough to just smile and say, have a nice day.
Right, you need to actually know your stuff.
You need to have real expertise.
Exactly. It's about having a deep understanding of your field so you can provide real insights and solutions tailored to each customer's needs.
That makes sense.
That's what sets companies apart in today's competitive landscape.
So yeah, being a leader is definitely not for the faint of heart.
Not at all. It's a demanding role for sure.
It really is. I mean, it's like they're wearing all these different hats: planner, organizer, motivator,
Yeah.
mentor, cheerleader.
Right.
The list goes on and on.
It was a lot to juggle.
And then just when you think you've wrapped your head around all those roles, the textbook throws in this organizational chart.
Uh-huh.
You know, the classic pyramid
Oh, yeah.
with the CEO at the top and everyone else branching out below.
The traditional hierarchy.
And it just felt so rigid.
Well, it is a very traditional model.
Right.
And it can be useful for clarifying lines of authority and responsibility. But you're right, it does feel a bit outdated, especially when you think about all this emphasis on collaboration and employee empowerment these days.
Exactly. It
Um,
seems like that kind of hierarchical structure might actually hinder innovation, don't you think?
It absolutely can. In today's fast-paced, knowledge-driven world, companies need to be more agile and adaptable. It's less about top-down commands and more about fostering communication, breaking down silos between departments, and empowering teams to make decisions closer to the action.
So instead of a rigid pyramid, we're talking more about a network, a web, something that allows for more fluid movement and collaboration. Yeah.
Exactly, and that raises a really interesting question for our listeners to consider.
Okay.
How do you envision traditional hierarchies evolving in the future? As technology continues to change the way we work, what new structures might emerge?
That's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely something to ponder. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's take a step back and recap what we've uncovered so far in our deep dive.
Sounds good.
So we started by exploring the spectrum of leadership styles,
Mm-hmm.
from authoritarian to democratic,
Right.
and how the ideal approach can vary depending on the situation.
Exactly. Context is key.
And then we dug into those contrasting theories of employee motivation, Theory X, which views employees as inherently needing external motivation, versus Theory Y, which focuses on tapping into people's natural desire to do good work.
Right. Two very different perspectives on human nature.
And we also talked about the concept of human capital, the idea that employees are a company's most valuable resource, and how this shift in thinking is leading to a greater emphasis on creating workplaces that are not just efficient, but also fulfilling.
It's about recognizing the whole person, not just the worker.
Exactly. And of course, we can't forget about Kunskap's Basert service,
Yes, knowledge-based service.
which highlights the importance of knowledge and expertise in providing exceptional customer experiences.
It's about going above and beyond.
For sure. And all of this points to the increasing complexity of leadership roles in the modern workplace.
Mm-hmm.
Leaders today need a diverse skill set,
Absolutely.
and they need to be adaptable, able to navigate a constantly changing landscape.
It's a challenging but also incredibly rewarding role.
I bet. So there you have it, folks. The first part of our deep dive into the world of management and personnel.
We've only just scratched the surface.
But don't worry, there's plenty more to come. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll delve even deeper into these fascinating topics.
We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to our deep dive.
So, you know, as we were wrapping up that last part,
Mm-hmm.
I kept thinking about all the things a leader has to juggle these days.
Right.
It's kind of mind-boggling.
It really is. The demands are greater than ever, and the skill set required has expanded significantly.
Absolutely. And one of the textbooks we're looking at actually uses this framework called the 5P to try to capture that scope.
Okay.
I have to admit, it sounded a little bit gimmicky at first.
Yeah.
But the more I think about it, the more it makes sense.
I think so too. The 5Ps can be a really helpful way to understand how the different aspects of a business are interconnected.
Right. It's not just about having a great product. It's about pricing it right, getting it to the right people.
Exactly. And all of that.
Yeah. So for our listeners who might not have encountered this framework before, should we kind of walk through it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So the first P is product, which seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it seems like it would be, but it actually goes deeper than just what you're selling.
Okay.
It's about understanding the value proposition, the problem your product solves, and how it fits into the market.
And a leader needs to be able to articulate that, I guess.
Yes, both internally to their team and externally to customers and stakeholders.
Makes sense. All right. So then we have price, which I'm guessing is about finding that sweet spot where you're competitive, but also making a profit.
Exactly, and it's not a static thing. You have to consider your costs, your competitors' pricing, even things like perceived value and brand positioning.
It's a lot more complex than I thought.
It really is.
Okay, so we've got product and price. Those are pretty much what I expected. The third P is place, which initially I thought was about like location, like where your store is or your office.
Yeah.
But it's actually about distribution, right?
Yes, it's about how your product gets to your customers.
Okay.
And in today's world, that can be incredibly complex. You might have online sales, retail partnerships, direct-to-consumer channels. It's a constantly evolving landscape.
It really highlights how a leader can't just be focused on one thing.
Right. They need to have a big picture view of the entire ecosystem.
Okay, so that brings us to the fourth P, which is promotion.
Or as one of the textbooks called it, påvirkning,
Overking.
which I think is even more interesting.
And that means,
It's the Norwegian word for influence.
okay, so influence.
Yeah, essentially it's about influencing your target audience, getting your message out there.
For like marketing, advertising, public relations, all that.
Exactly. It's about crafting a compelling narrative, building brand awareness, and engaging with your customers in a meaningful way.
Okay, so we've covered product, price, place, and promotion. That leaves us with the final P, personnel.
Yes, the people.
And this one, I have to say, feels like the most important of all.
I would agree. At the end of the day, a company's success comes down to its people.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how brilliant your product or your strategy is, if you don't have the right team in place, it's all for nothing.
Absolutely. And it's not just about hiring the right people. It's about creating a culture where they can thrive, where they feel valued and motivated to do their best work.
That's right. And that brings us back to some of the concepts we talked about in the first part, like theory Y and human capital. Yeah, these aren't just abstract theories. They're frameworks that can guide leaders in building truly high-performing organizations.
And speaking of which, one of the textbooks had this really interesting case study about a company that completely restructured their operations based on these ideas.
Oh, yes, I remember that one.
They basically threw out the old hierarchical model and went for something much flatter and more collaborative.
It was a pretty radical move.
It was, and I can imagine some people being resistant to that kind of change.
Oh, for sure. Change is always difficult.
So what was the outcome? Did it actually work?
It did. They saw significant improvements in productivity, morale, and even customer satisfaction.
Wow.
Employees felt more empowered and engaged, and communication across the organization improved dramatically.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
It just goes to show that sometimes you need to be willing to shake things up and rethink the old ways of doing things.
Absolutely. The traditional top-down pyramid might not be the best model for every company, especially in today's rapidly changing world.
It seems like recognizing that the best ideas can come from anywhere.
Exactly, not just from the top of the hierarchy.
Right. If you're constantly micromanaging people and stifling creativity, you're not exactly setting the stage for innovation.
No, you're not. It's about creating an environment where people feel safe to take risks, share their ideas, and collaborate openly.
And, speaking of expertise and collaboration, I keep coming back to that concept of Basert service,
Knowledge-based service.
which goes beyond just basic customer service. It's about having a deep understanding of your field and being able to provide truly insightful solutions.
It's about being a trusted advisor, someone who can anticipate their clients' needs and offer valuable guidance.
And that requires continuous learning.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely. The world is changing so fast that you can't just rest on your laurels.
No.
You have to be constantly updating your knowledge and skills.
And that's another area where leadership plays a crucial role, I guess.
Yes. It's about fostering a culture of continuous learning, encouraging employees to stay curious and to embrace new challenges.
Okay, so we've talked about the 5 Ps, product, price, place, promotion, and personnel.
Right.
We've looked at a case study where a company completely restructured to become more collaborative and employee-centric.
Yes.
And we've touched on the importance of continuous learning and expertise in a world that's changing faster than ever.
That's a lot to take in.
It is. So where does all this lead us?
Yeah.
What are the key takeaways for our listeners? So welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into these business textbooks.
Yeah.
I have to say, going through all this stuff,
Yeah.
it's really shifted my perspective on what it actually takes to build a successful company.
Right.
And what it even means to be a good leader in today's world.
Yeah. It's amazing how much these fundamental ideas about management and personnel, they really impact everything from a company's bottom line to, like you said, the day-to-day experience of everyone who works there.
Yeah, totally. And I think one of the biggest things we've been talking about is this whole idea of human capital.
Right. Treating employees like valuable assets.
Exactly. Rather than just cogs in a machine. But as we're wrapping up this deep dive, I'm curious, how do you see that playing out in the future?
That's a good question.
Do you think companies are really starting to embrace this shift in mindset?
I do think there's a genuine shift happening.
Okay.
Of course, there are always going to be companies that cling to those outdated models of management,
Right.
but the smart ones, the ones that are really going to thrive in the long run,
Yeah,
they're the ones that understand that their people are their biggest competitive advantage.
that makes sense. And it's not just about lip service, right?
No, definitely
It's
not.
about actually creating a workplace culture where people feel valued and supported and empowered to do their best work.
Exactly. And that goes beyond, things like ping pong tables and free snacks. It's about things like, providing opportunities for growth and development,
Right.
fostering open communication, creating a sense of shared purpose.
And like you were saying before about those psychological job requirements, it's the idea that people are motivated by things like autonomy, mastery, and purpose.
Right. When you design jobs and, structure your organization with those needs in mind, that's when you start to see real engagement and innovation.
It's like if you trust people to do good work
hmm
and you give them the space to do it, they're going to rise to the occasion.
Right.
But if you're constantly looking over their shoulder, micromanaging every little detail,
Yeah.
you're basically sending the message that you don't trust them.
Exactly. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you treat people like they're not capable,
Right.
they're likely to disengage and just go through the motion.
Totally. But if you trust them to take ownership and make decisions, you might be surprised by what they can accomplish.
Absolutely.
So as we bring this deep dive to a close,
Yeah.
what are some of the key takeaways that you hope our listeners will walk away with?
Well, first and foremost, I hope they have a better understanding of the different approaches to leadership and management and how those approaches can impact, the overall culture and the effectiveness of an organization.
Yeah, from that whole theory X versus theory Y debate
Yeah.
to those 5 Ps of marketing.
Right. Product, price, place, promotion, personnel.
It feels like we've covered a lot of ground.
We have, and I think it's important to remember that all of these concepts are interconnected. You can't just focus on one aspect of your business in isolation.
Yeah.
You need to have a holistic view, understanding how each piece fits into that larger puzzle.
And of course, none of it works if you don't have the right people on board.
Right.
And you create a culture where they can thrive.
Exactly. As we move further into the 21st century, with technology advancing at this crazy pace,
Yeah.
the companies that are really going to succeed,
Mhm.
they're the ones that recognize the importance of human capital.
Okay.
They invest in their employees, they foster collaboration and innovation,
Yeah.
and they create workplaces that are not just efficient,
Right.
but also fulfilling.
So it's not just about, profits and bottom lines anymore.
No.
It's about creating something meaningful, something that people can actually be proud to be a part of.
Well said. I think that's a great note to end on.
It really is. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of business and management.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Always a pleasure. And who knows, maybe we'll revisit some of these themes again in the future
Yeah.
as the world of work continues to evolve.
Absolutely. There's always something new to learn.
That's the truth.
Oh.
All right, folks, until next time.